When someone talks about the most beautiful Japanese cars in history, thus most people think of the 1980s or 1990s, and that's a huge mistake because long before the Supra and long before the Skyline GT-R, Japan was already building automobiles capable of rivaling some of Europe's finest sports cars in terms of beauty. And the most surprising part is that almost nobody knows them. Today we'll discover some of the most elegant, exclusive, and remarkable masterpieces that came out of Japan during a decade that forever transformed the automotive industry. 1967, Mazda Cosmo Sport 110S. If someone told you that one of the most beautiful Japanese cars of the 1960s was also one of the most revolutionary automobiles in the world, you'd probably think of a Ferrari, but you'd be wrong, because that car was a Mazda, and it changed the brand's history forever. When the Cosmo debuted in 1967, it looked like a car from the future. The body was incredibly low, the lines were clean and elegant, and the proportions were reminiscent of some of the finest European Grand Tours of the era. No one expected Japan to build a sports car with such presence, but Mazda was determined to prove it could compete with anyone, and it certainly did. But this is where the story becomes truly fascinating, because the Cosmo Sport didn't just stand out for its design. It also hid one of the most innovative technologies ever seen in a production automobile. Under the hood was a compact twin-rotor Wankel rotary engine, producing around 110 horsepower. That figure may not seem spectacular today, but in 1967, it was a true technological revolution. Thanks to its low weight and excellent aerodynamics, the Cosmo Sport could exceed 115 miles per hour, an impressive speed for a Japanese sports car of its era, and enough to prove that Japan was ready to compete with the world's most prestigious manufacturers. But perhaps its greatest legacy wasn't its speed, it was paving the way for an entire generation of Japanese sports cars. Without the Cosmo Sport, Mazda's history would very likely have been completely different. Its production was also extremely limited. Fewer than 1,200 units were built, which today makes it one of the most exclusive and sought-after Japanese classics among collectors. Today, the finest Mazda Cosmo Sport 110S examples easily exceed $250,000, while the most original cars continue to increase in value year after year. 1968. Isuzu 117. Some automobiles grow old, others simply become classics. And then there are cars like the Isuzu, an automobile so elegant that even today it could easily pass for a European Grand Tourer, and that's no coincidence. Because it was designed by one of the most important figures in automotive history, Giorgetto Giugiaro, the same designer responsible for some of the world's most iconic sports cars. From the very first glance, it projected sophistication. The long hood, the graceful roofline, and the perfectly balanced proportions created a silhouette that looked more Italian than Japanese. It was an elegant car, but it was also highly exclusive, and that was precisely where much of its charm came from. But this is where the story becomes truly interesting, because the first 117 coupés were assembled almost entirely by hand, something extremely unusual for a Japanese manufacturer of that era. That level of craftsmanship was reflected in every detail. The finishes, the materials, and the build quality gave the car a sense of refinement rarely found in Japanese sports cars of the late 1960s. Today, the finest Isuzu 117 Coupé examples easily exceed $80,000, while the early hand-built cars command considerably higher prices among collectors. And more than 50 years later, it remains one of the most elegant, exclusive, and beautiful Japanese automobiles ever to roll off a production line during the 1960s. 1967 Toyota 2000 GT. If there is one automobile that changed the world's perception of Japanese cars forever, it's this one. Because before the Toyota 2000 GT, very few people believed Japan could build a sports car capable of competing with Ferrari, Jaguar, or Porsche. After it, no one ever doubted it again. From the very beginning, the 2000 GT looked like a work of art. The long hood, the incredibly low body, and the smooth, perfectly proportioned lines created a silhouette that is still considered one of the most beautiful ever designed. It didn't look like a Japanese car. It looked like an exclusive European Grand Tourer, and that was exactly what Toyota wanted to prove. But this is where the story becomes truly fascinating, because the 2000 GT wasn't just beautiful, it was also extraordinarily advanced. Its development was carried out in collaboration with Yamaha, which helped refine the engine and participated in the car's production. Under the hood was a refined 2.0-liter inline-six, producing around 150 horsepower. The figure may not seem impressive compared to some European sports cars, but thanks to its excellent balance and low weight, the 2000 GT could exceed 137 miles per hour, an extraordinary speed for a Japanese sports car of the late 1960s, and enough to compete with some of the world's finest Grand Tourers. But perhaps its greatest achievement was something else. It proved that Japan could build a world-class automobile, a car capable of captivating people with its design, its engineering, and its performance on the road. And that became the starting point for everything that followed. Its production was also extremely limited. Only 351 units were built, which today makes the Toyota 2000 GT one of the most exclusive and valuable Japanese automobiles in history. Today, the finest examples easily sell for more than $1 million at international auctions. And now, I want to hear your opinion. Of the cars we've seen so far, which one would you choose? The revolutionary Mazda Cosmo Sport, the refined Isuzu 117 Coupe, or the legendary Toyota 2000 GT? Let me know in the comments. 1969 Mazda Luce Rotary Coupe. Many manufacturers were trying to build fast sports cars. Mazda wanted to build something different, an automobile that combined elegance, innovation, and exclusivity in a single package. And the Luce was exactly that. Because although it's one of the great forgotten names in Japanese automotive history today, at the time, it represented one of the country's greatest demonstrations of what its industry was capable of achieving. At first glance, it looked like a refined European Grand Tourer. The clean lines, the elongated silhouette, and the perfectly balanced proportions were no coincidence. Its design also bore the signature of Giorgetto Giugiaro, and that was evident from every angle. It was elegant, it was sophisticated, and it had a presence that very few Japanese automobiles could match in the late 1960s. Beneath that distinguished bodywork was another of Mazda's greatest technological achievements, a twin-rotor Wankel rotary engine producing around 126 horsepower, enough to propel the Luce to a top speed of nearly 118 miles per hour. But its true appeal wasn't found only in its performance. It was in the way it delivered its power. The engine ran with remarkable smoothness, it revved effortlessly, and it offered a personality completely different from any other Japanese coupe of its generation. Today, the finest Mazda Luce Rotary Coupe examples easily exceed $100,000, while the best-preserved cars continue to increase in value among collectors around the world. And more than 50 years later, it remains one of the most elegant, exclusive, and underrated Japanese automobiles born during the 1960s. 1969 Nissan Skyline 2000 GT-R. Today, when someone hears that name, they automatically think of one of the most famous Japanese sports cars in the world. But that entire story began here, with an automobile that wasn't just fast, it was also surprisingly elegant. Because the first GT-R wasn't designed to attract attention with giant wings or aggressive styling, its beauty was much more understated. And that's precisely why it has aged so well. The straight lines, the perfectly balanced proportions, and the chrome accents created a clean and sophisticated silhouette. It didn't need exaggeration. Its design projected confidence, and that was enough. But this is where the story becomes truly fascinating, because beneath that elegant body was the same spirit that dominated Japanese racing circuits. The Skyline 2000 GT-R inherited much of its technology from the Prince R380, a racing prototype that had already demonstrated the potential of Japanese engineering. Under the hood was an extraordinary 2.0-liter inline-six, producing around 160 horsepower, an impressive figure for a sedan in 1969. Thanks to that, it could exceed 124 miles per hour, and more importantly, it delivered handling that very few automobiles in its class could match. It didn't take long to prove it. The GT-R racked up dozens of victories on Japanese racetracks, building a reputation that would eventually become legendary. But its legacy goes far beyond racing, because this car created one of the most respected nameplates in automotive history. Without this GT-R, the Skyline models that dominated the following decades probably would never have existed. Today, the finest first-generation Nissan Skyline 2000 GT-R examples easily exceed $500,000, while the most original cars command even higher prices among collectors. 1968, Datsun Sports 2000. Long before the Fairlady Z became famous around the world, Nissan was already building a sports car capable of competing with some of Europe's finest roadsters. And that car was the Datsun Sports 2000, an automobile that proved Japan had already mastered the balance between beauty and performance. From the very first glance, it was impossible not to admire it. The long hood, the low driving position, and the clean body lines created the perfect image of a classic sports car. It didn't need extravagant styling. Its elegance came from its simplicity, and that's exactly why it remains so attractive more than 50 years later. Under the hood was a 2.0-liter four-cylinder engine, producing around 135 horsepower. But perhaps its greatest strength was its balance. It was fast, agile, reliable, and refined enough to be driven every day, a combination that very few sports cars could offer by the late 1960s. The Datsun Sports 2000 also helped pave the way for the birth of the Fairlady Z, a model that would go on to become one of the most important Japanese sports cars of all time. Without this roadster, that story would probably have been very different. Today, the finest Datsun Sports 2000 examples easily exceed $70,000, while perfectly restored cars continue to rise in value among collectors. And now, I want to hear your opinion. Of all the cars we've seen so far, which one do you think is the most beautiful? The revolutionary Toyota 2000 GT, the refined Mazda Luce, the legendary Skyline GT-R, or this elegant Datsun Sports 2000? Let me know in the comments. 1965 Nissan Silvia. Long before it became an icon among Japanese sports car enthusiasts, the Silvia name already stood for elegance, and the first generation made it clear that Nissan had very different ambitions from the rest of the Japanese manufacturers, because this car wasn't designed to be sold in large numbers. It was designed to demonstrate what Japan was capable of. At first glance, it looked like an exclusive Italian coupe. The low body, the perfectly balanced lines, and the carefully crafted proportions made many people mistake it for a European automobile. But it wasn't. It was completely Japanese, and that was precisely where much of its charm came from. But this is where the story becomes truly interesting, because the Silvia was one of the most exclusive automobiles Nissan ever produced. Its construction was almost entirely handcrafted, and throughout its production, only about 550 units were built. That made it an extraordinarily rare automobile, even when it was new. Under the hood was a 1.6-liter four-cylinder engine, producing around 96 horsepower. It didn't need massive engines. Its beauty came from simplicity, and that's something very few automobiles ever achieve. Today, the finest first-generation Nissan Silvia examples easily exceed $250,000, while the most original cars continue to rise in value because of their extraordinary rarity. 1966 Honda S800. Sometimes beauty isn't about size, it's about personality. And few Japanese automobiles proved that better than the S800, because while many manufacturers were turning to increasingly larger engines, Honda chose a completely different path: smaller, lighter, and surprisingly exciting. At first glance, it looked like an elegant European roadster. The compact body, the smooth lines, and its perfectly balanced proportions gave it a charm that remains irresistible even today. But this is where the story becomes truly interesting, because beneath that small body was one of the most advanced powertrains in its class. A four-cylinder engine displacing just 791 cubic centimeters and producing around 70 horsepower. It may not sound like much, but that engine was capable of revving beyond 8,000 revolutions per minute, something absolutely extraordinary for a production automobile in the 1960s. Thanks to its lightweight construction, the S800 could exceed 100 miles per hour, and it delivered an incredibly agile and enjoyable driving experience. It offered a connection between car and driver that very few automobiles of its era could match. It also marked the beginning of a philosophy that Honda would continue developing for decades: compact automobiles, brilliant engines, and engineering capable of achieving a great deal with very little. Today, the finest Honda S800 examples easily exceed $70,000, while the best-preserved cars continue to increase in value among collectors of classic Japanese automobiles. And after going through this entire list, it's clear that the 1960s marked a turning point for the Japanese automotive industry, because it was the decade when Japan stopped following trends and started creating them. But now I want to hear your opinion. Of all the cars we saw today, which do you think is the most beautiful Japanese automobile of the 1960s? The Toyota 2000 GT, the Skyline GT-R, the Nissan Silvia, or do you have another favorite? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey through Japan's automotive masterpieces, don't miss the video appearing on your screen now, because we'll travel to Europe to discover some of the most beautiful automobiles built during the 1960s. And believe me, the battle for the title of the most elegant car is far from over. See you in the next video.